Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning to everyone on the West Coast, and good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast. Welcome to Pathways RTC webinar on social media. Just a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Please move any handheld devices away from your computer and speakers, and we recommend that you close all your file sharing applications and streaming music or video. Check the audio pane in your GoToMeeting panel if you're experiencing any audio problems. During the presentation, you can send questions to us, the webinar organizers, but these will be held to the end. And we've muted folks during the webinar because sometimes ambient noise can disrupt the webinar's progress. A recording of this webinar will also be available at the Pathways website at the URL shown below, and we'll revisit that again. And this is our December 9th webinar, Engaging Youth and Young Adults in Social Media. I am John Osowski with Pathways for Positive Futures, and I would like to introduce our guest speaker, expert in this area, Brittany Smith. And Brittany, if you would just say a few words of introduction.
Great, thank you, John. Hi there, everyone. My name is Brittany Smith, and I am a social media consultant with my own company, Build Social LLC. So I help individuals and organizations, such as all of you on the line, think through how to use and take advantage of social media to reach your audience. I help Pathways RTC take advantage of social media and do their regular social media management for them.
Okay. And I'd like to kind of introduce some of the topics that we have for you today, namely, what is social media, who's using it, how are people using it, and what are the benefits and risks, some example sites, organizational considerations, platforms, and then creative content. So we've got a full show for you today, and we're hoping that we can wrap this up. Unfortunately, we got to wrap it up a little bit earlier because of some conflicting scheduling here at the RRI, but we hope to cover this pretty thoroughly. So with that, I will turn things over to Brittany, and Brittany, just let me know when you want me to advance your slides.
Sounds great. So you can go ahead and pull up the next slide, John, and you'll have to click twice to actually make the content show up. So to start off, I thought we could do a really good overview. And John, just a note, it does look like you're not in full screen mode in PowerPoint, so it's actually showing the next slide as well as all of my notes. Which
yes,
a little bit
and that is because this is my first time running through this with two screens. Not quite sure how to remedy that.
No worries. We can just plow ahead. I'll talk while you do.
Well, I try to fix it, huh? All right.
Well, let's just start off, everyone, by going over exactly what is social media. I always like to kind of orient folks to, you know, we all know what social media is. We see it in our everyday lives. We use Facebook. We know what Facebook is. But truly, what is a good, all-inclusive definition of social media so that as new technologies arise, we can actually find out, well, does this count as social media or not? So the definition that I like to use for social media is any online platform or channel for publishing and disseminating user-generated content. So basically what that means is when I'm using Facebook, it's an online platform or channel, and it's taking the content that I write, that I create as a user, and it's disseminating it to the people in my network. So that is a good definition of social media. A part of why social media is so interesting and engaging and powerful is because it does have this ability for anyone out there to create and disseminate content to their network. So from an organizational perspective, this is really interesting and engaging because it allows us as organizations to have transparency and accountability in a way that we've never had before. So if we think about this, like the White House, for example, the White House does a wonderful job using social media. They are a very large organization that ordinarily we as citizens might not feel a strong connection with. But because of their use of social media, I feel that I am able to have a greater connection with the White House. They make Facebook posts, they're on Instagram, and I have an ability as a citizen to get in touch with the White House in a way that I've never had before because of that transparency and accountability that is built into social media. Every individual can now publicly state their opinion, whether it's positive or negative, and because of the public nature of the space, that opinion is often listened to and taken seriously. As individuals, social media allows us to take our environment and engage with it and shape it in a way that I personally find both empowering and exciting. At the organizational level, again, we can kind of take this accountability and transparency and empower our audience and our networks to engage with us and make the services that we provide that much more useful and impactful because people have new ways to get in touch with us. The other aspect of social media that I really love is that we have access to all sorts of information that we previously didn't have at our fingertips. So for example, for youth and young adults that happen to be in foster care or receiving mental health services, as an example, some of the information that matters most to them is information about their health or information about their family so that they can make better decisions and get help and support when they need it. Social media increases their ability to do this. So it's really this access to both connection and information that makes social media so popular. And you may not know this, but when we're online using social media, our brains actually release the cuddle hormone oxytocin, which is another reason I tend to think that social media is so popular. So if we move on to the next slide, John, take it seriously. It looks like that's the slide you're on now. And if you just hit full screen mode, like slideshow mode,
yeah, I've been trying that, and the problem is that I have it on full screen on my second monitor, but not my first. So I'm thinking if you can just continue from here. I apologize to everyone for my lack of technological prowess in this regard. And I am getting a request, Brittany, if you could just speak up a little bit, that would probably help too.
You got it.
Thanks.
And remember, folks, you can control the volume on your own computers as well. So we now have a pretty good understanding of social media, and kind of at least you see why I think it's powerful and exciting. So let's, regardless of kind of how you may feel about social media, let's establish how widespread it is. And we need to know, again, regardless of how we feel about it, we need to take it seriously. So I've got some stats up here on this slide that will help you understand why you should take it seriously and how widespread it really is. So as of January 2014, 74% of online adults use social media. So that means that social media is reaching more of the population than anything else out there. In addition, we spend 20% of our time on computers using social media, and we spend a significant amount of time, as I'm sure you guys can guess, on our computers. So you can only imagine how much time we are spending on social media. 63% of Facebook users report that they use it at least daily. And this is a statistic I love that's specific to youth and young adults, or millennials. 32% rather, of 18 to 24-year-olds use social media while in the bathroom. So what that shows is we're connected pretty much all the time. So as you can see, we spend a lot of time online, and in particular on social networking sites. One other thing to note is just we spend about 3.5 hours online every day. So we're very connected, and a part of that connection is social media. So regardless of how we feel about it, it's very important that we take it seriously. So moving on to the next slide, let's examine a little bit why people use social media. I kind of mentioned, when we're on social media, we're releasing the cuddle hormone oxytocin, which makes us feel really good. And what this really illustrates is that our use of social media is really about relationships. It's not about technology. It's really about connecting with people. The primary reason that people actually use social media is to connect with family members and friends. And that means when we're using social media, we're really connecting with people that we already know. It's only a small percentage of people out there that are creating new networks of people using social media and the internet. The majority of us are really connecting with people that we already know and that we have a very close relationship with offline. So roughly 2/3 of social media users say that staying in touch with current family and friends is a major reason they use these sites, while half say that connecting with old friends they've lost touch with is a major reason behind use of these technologies. One other thing to note is that most adults have generally positive experiences using social media. So you can see to the right of the text here, I have a Wordle, which was developed by the Pew Internet and American Life Project based on a survey they did asking adults to describe their experiences using social media. So the more often people used a word in their response, the larger it is here in this word cloud. So you can see based on this graphic that people are having positive experiences when they're using social media. So know that people are joining social media to stay connected, and they continue to use it and stay engaged because of the positive experiences that they're having. So on the next slide, we'll actually go over some of those positive benefits of using social media that you may not be aware of. So it's important to note that, and John, it looks like we're still on. There we go. I love it. Okay. So it's important to note that Facebook users in particular, there's a lot of good things that we can say about Facebook users. We can't draw a causal connection. We can't say that because people are using Facebook, these things are happening. But it is important to note that the people that are using Facebook and using it regularly have these things in common. So for example, the average user of a social networking site, Facebook being the most popular, has more close ties and is half as likely to be socially isolated as the average American. In general, Facebook users are more trusting, they have more social support, and they're much more politically engaged than most Americans. On the next bullet, we see that 65% of teens have had an experience on social media that made them feel good about themselves, and 58% as a result of using social media have felt closer to another person. In addition, young adults, I find this study particularly fascinating. Young adults who spend more time on Facebook in particular, are better at showing virtual empathy to their online friends, and such online empathy predicts real-world empathy. Carrying that forward, youth who use blogs, websites, and email to discuss politics and current events become more socially engaged over time. Another interesting study out there, it's a small study, of about 63 Cornell University undergraduates, but researchers found that people reported higher self-esteem after spending time on their Facebook profile than after time spent looking into a mirror. So what we can take away from that is not that, we shouldn't look at ourselves in the mirror and that instead we should spend time on Facebook. Rather, what we can take away from that is that Facebook gives us, as youth and young adults, a unique opportunity to show and create a positive version of ourselves, where we can practice things like connection and empathy, and that those things translate into how we interface with ourselves and with the world. So from my perspective, these positive benefits are absolutely astounding, and they're just the tip of the iceberg. The list goes on, and you can see more of these benefits. If you click on the links that I have on all of my slides, you'll be able to really dig into some of these studies and resources yourself and see a lot of these positive benefits. And we will go over some of the kind of maladaptive strategies and coping mechanisms that youth and young adults have towards social media, but I really wanted to drive home some of these positive benefits so that we can establish for ourselves at an organizational level that it can be worthwhile to use social media as a tool and be very intentional about the use of that as a tool to really bring about some of those positive benefits for our audience. So now that we understand what social media is, why people are using it, and some of those positive benefits, let's hone in on millennials specifically. So we're all kind of familiar with millennials, but I want to clearly define the age range that we're talking about. And each study kind of has a different way of approaching this age group. So one of the resources that I use is a Nielsen study on millennials, and they define millennials as 18 to 36-year-olds. That's a pretty wide range. And then if you look at the Pew Internet and American Life Project, they define millennials as 18 to 29-year-olds. So each time I give a bit of data, I'll specifically say which age range I'm referring to. But as you can see in this first bullet, 89% of online 18 to 29-year-olds use social media. So if we look at the general population, 74% of online adults use social media. When we look specifically at 18 to 29-year-olds, we see that it jumps up to 89%. So in general, we know millennials are using social media a lot at much higher rates than the rest of the population. So how do those youth and young adults, how do millennials feel about that new technology? We know that more than 74% of them feel that new technology makes their lives easier, and 54% feel that it helps them be closer to their friends and family. So that fits with a lot of the national level data that we saw about adults, online adults, and their use of social media, but we can see that that's even more true for youth and young adults. In the next bullet, this is just something I wanted to throw in. I think it really kind of helps to illustrate millennials and our approach towards technology, because it's very important to keep that in mind as we're using technology to reach out to this audience. So when asked what makes their generation unique, millennials ranked technology use. In contrast, when baby boomers were asked what makes their generation unique, they said work ethic. So it's really important to keep in mind when reaching out to millennials that this technology is very much a part of our identity. It's a part of how we stay in touch with the world, stay in touch with the people that we're very close to, and a part of how we think about and understand our identity. So now that we've established some of that foundation, I'd love to pass it over for John so we can start looking into a more balanced perspective of social media.
Okay, great, and thank you, Brittany. I have been noting that we've been getting a lot of issues with the audio on this presentation. I do apologize for all the technical difficulties we've been having today. Hopefully this is resolving itself. I don't hear anything on my end, so if you're continuing to have audio, it might be helpful to try to see if there's something on your end that you can adjust, and we'll keep going forward.
And John, to just jump in really quickly, one common problem that folks have is that GoToWebinar often defaults to using your computer speakers. So if you're having issues with the audio coming through your computer, I recommend that you guys, instead of having mic and speaker selected, click on telephone and dial in, and that might improve your quality. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, all right. Thanks, Brittany. So I get to play devil's advocate a little bit here with Brittany, whereas she mentioned a lot of the positives of social media and the benefits, and those are very easily recognizable. I have to go through some of the potential negatives. And, in talking with Brittany about this, we wanted to have a very balanced conversation. And what really came down to, and the point that we want to drive home, is that social media is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used in a number of different ways, in a positive way and in a negative way. And maladaptive strategies that happen offline are going to happen online, but they're going to happen through the way the tool works. So for instance, if an individual has the ability to self-promote or selectively share things about themselves, they can inflate their sense of self. They can present an inflated positive attribute and diminish the negatives. And also, because of the ability to connect with a number of people very quickly all at once, you can have the potential for less meaningful relationships, fewer, less of the more intimate ones that people can have. And some studies have corroborated this, that lower self-esteem correlated with more frequent visits to Facebook, and individuals who scored higher on a narcissism scale also engaged in more online activity. So these are just things to be aware of in balancing your online and offline life, and especially for young people who are really interested in using this technology. One of the things we hope to show you today are ways that you can harness this as a force for good. Certainly, I know a lot of folks have noticed in the past, or have said they've noticed a lot of strong negatives with the internet. But again, if it's just a tool and you're seeing those kinds of effects, imagine how much more positive the effects could be if you use the tool in the same way but for a different goal. And moving toward that, social media has been studied as a way for mental health information support to reach audiences that are at times very hard to reach, and audiences that arguably might need that information the most. Certainly, if you tell people about your research, they look at it. Although it's not as clear whether that reach has the same kinds of impacts that we'd like it to have. And again, this is where that online and offline life have to sort of come together. Just because you've reached folks and you've put your message out there doesn't necessarily mean that it's having the impact that you intend or that you even want. Reach is a major benefit, though, of using social media, and I wanted to spend a minute talking about that. Social media, because it is conducted over the internet, can overcome both a geographic and social isolation. So I'm thinking about the young person that might be living in a rural area who has, needs information but isn't quite sure where to turn. Or someone, a lot of folks, it's been studied, are experiencing stigma regarding their mental health challenge. And this is a way for them to anonymously and privately get the information that they need that can be supportive to them. And platforms like Twitter have been shown to instantly share messages with folks who need it. And especially, again, going back to that slide about impact, actionable messages seem to be the most successful. So it isn't enough then to just say, here's the data, or here's what's the trend. Here's what you can do based on what we know. Those are the most effective ways of reaching your audience and having some impact. And again, keeping with that theme of social media and the internet as being just a tool, content is the same way. It can be your friend or it can be your foe. Content can be used to create an online supportive community with recovery-oriented messages, and we're going to go over some really good exemplars of that you can emulate and that you can even direct young people to. However, content can also glamorize self-destructive behavior and trigger urges to participate in it, and even offer strategies. And the take-home message there really is the content being moderated by someone or not? The real problems with content, especially with social media, come from these unmoderated sites, unmoderated conversations, where basically anything can go. And unfortunately, in those kinds of forums, negative messages go unchecked and sort of take on a life of their own. So really, it's up to us to, one, really promote sites that are moderating their content, and two, to monitor our own content and help young people navigate social media in a way that's positive and that also meshes with an offline experience of people. Here's one of the exemplars that we wanted to show you. It's called reachout.com. And it offers support via phone, text, and online forums, and it presents content that's relevant to young people, real-life stories, videos, and especially user-created content. So this is content Again, needs to be moderated, but it's a it's a way of getting young people to tell their story or to interact with the media in a way that involves them in the message. So you can see reachout.com at us.reachout.com. Text Talk Act. This is another type of campaign, I would say, that has happened this past year, and I'm assuming it'll happen in the future as well. But it's a national conversation about youth mental health, and it was very clever in that it had an offline and an online component. Text messages were used to drive conversations offline. So you had groups of young people gather, they texted into this service, they received topics to discuss with their friends in that circle. The topics were discussed, and then they text their information back to the service, and they got to see how their responses matched up with similar groups around the nation. So they're also contributing to the content, and of course it's being moderated because it's being run by the communitysolutions.org folks. So again, this campaign did end in November of this year, but I'm assuming it'll continue. Seemed to have been very successful, so I would put it on your radars to look for in the future. So in summary, we've got social media really as a double-edged sword. On the benefits, it definitely has strong appeal to young people. Its anonymity helps you to avoid stigma. It definitely overcomes isolation, and it is effective and timely for sharing information. Can be used to create that supportive community with recovery-oriented messages. However, the flip side of that is that it does have a strong appeal, and the anonymity can actually foster isolation and explore potentially dangerous, especially unmoderated content. And because it is effective and shares timely information, it can sometimes glamorize those self-destructive behaviors and trigger urges. So how do we harness these benefits, the maximizing the benefits? Basically, we need to seek out and share positive online communities. We need to restrict access to unmoderated content, always view that with some kind of suspicion. Take it upon ourselves to curate the content that we have, and make those online interactions supportive of recovery and real-world relationships. And here's where user-generated content can even come in. It can be a way to engage people offline to create content. So it's a project that can happen in both realms. Brittany, I'm not sure if you want to add a little more to that.
No, not at all. I think you've covered it perfectly. Again, the important thing to keep in mind is that just like anything else out there, it's a tool with both pros and cons. And what we want you to come away with by the end of the webinar today is how you at an organizational level can use these tools effectively to maximize benefit. So with that in mind, let's take a little bit of a look at how at an organizational level you all can be using social media intentionally and strategically to engage with youth and young adults in light of the positive benefits and some of the ways that social media can be used as a negative coping mechanism. So one of the things that's really important at an organizational level when thinking about using social media to reach anyone, no matter who your audience is to have really specific goals for your social media presence. In general, social media is just one aspect of an overall digital marketing strategy. So ideally, you have some sort of a website in place, and you're using social media as an example to drive traffic to your website. Another way that you could use social media is to just engage with a certain target audience. So using the example of Reach Out, they have a wonderful Instagram feed where they do a really great job of reaching youth and young adults. And we'll talk, maybe even in the next slide, in the next couple of slides we'll talk specifically about what platforms to use. So I'll go into more detail about that, so don't worry. But you really want to have specific goals for your social media presence. Now, and after you have those goals outlined, you want to think about, well, who are we trying to reach? Most of you all are going to have more than one target audience. Of course, we know if you're on this webinar, youth and young adults are going to be an important target audience, but do you have other audiences out there that you're trying to reach? Because based on your target audience, and whether or not it's just one select group or a mix of people, you may want to use one platform over another, or use one platform, but keep in mind that you're meeting the needs of multiple different audiences, so you'll want to have a mix of messages that meet the needs of those various target audiences rather than just focusing on one and neglecting the others. So really map out as specifically as you can who that target audience is and any demographic information you have about them. So just like I was able to go out and find out information about millennials and some of their attitudes and preferences, you should do the same sort of research about whatever target audience you're trying to reach. After you know your target audience, you're going to want to think about which platforms to use. So we all know, too, the next bullet I kind of say, you want to think about your organizational capacity. There are so many platforms out there, and new platforms are emerging, it feels like, every couple of months. Or we have a news article that comes out and says, oh, this platform isn't cool anymore, but now this one is. So based on your goals and your target audience, you're going to want to think about what platforms to spend energy on. And not only which platforms to spend energy on, but how much energy do you have to spend, right? Social media, the good news about social media is that it is free, but it's free like kittens, right? Someone gives you kittens, you're like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever, but you gotta feed them. They need to have a place to pee, right? It ends up taking some time and energy and sometimes some money in order to take advantage of this free resource. So it's going to be impossible for you guys to be everywhere at once unless you have a lot of staff time to dedicate to social media management. So based on your goals and your target audience, you're going to want to pick one and maybe two platforms and really focus on those. So sit down and kind of do an audit of your organization. Look at how much FTE time you have to actually spend on both finding content and posting that content to social media, and then monitoring, hopefully, as people engage with you. As a rule of thumb, I kind of recommend, the metric I use is that it takes about 1 hour per platform per week. And that's if you're pretty efficient at finding the content and creating the content that you then want to post to social media. So in general, I recommend that my clients have at least one half-time FTE dedicated to digital marketing. And that's a lot, right? So you really want to examine your organizational capacity, see how much time you have, and then be very realistic with yourself based on that about how much time you can be spending on social media and social media management. One way to maximize that organizational capacity and to get the most bang for your buck is to be very strategic in the way that you use social media as a part of your overall digital marketing strategy. So one thing that you're going to want to do is develop a social media strategy. Some organizations, if they have the budget and the capacity, develop a very comprehensive social media strategy that's a roadmap, and then their staff can just follow the roadmap. If you don't have that sort of the ability to create that sort of a strategy, there are some quick and dirty tools out there that help you think through just a bare-bones strategy that at least gives you something to work with. Definitely something is better than nothing. Another thing that really helps to be more efficient and to maximize your time is to use tools like Buffer. If you go to Buffer app, bufferapp.com, it's a free tool that allows you to actually schedule out your social media posts. In addition, Facebook itself has a feature that allows you to schedule out your posts in Facebook so that you're not having to log in every single day and make a post to your Facebook page every day, but instead you can sit down at the beginning of the week and schedule out all of those Facebook posts in one sitting. In addition, Facebook has a feature that allows you to see what time your audience is online so that you can make sure that you're posting to Facebook when your audience is actually online. And if you go to my website, buildsocialconsulting.com, I just wrote a blog post yesterday about how to use the Facebook scheduling feature so that you can see what time of day your audience is online and then how to schedule out posts to match when they're actually online. But really, the goal is, using all of these tools that I just mapped out, the goal is just for you to be as strategic, efficient, and intentional as possible, so that at the organizational level, you are able to take advantage of this technology and monitor things carefully so that you are moderating all the content that's out there and know what's going on so you can really maximize those positive benefits. Going to our next slide, one other thing, and develop a policy. Thank you. I forgot about that last bullet. So one other really important thing, again, thinking about, really taking advantage of the positive benefits of social media, we know that some negative things can happen on social media, and that youth and young adults can use social media as a tool to reach out when they're feeling isolated. So if you are engaging with youth and young adults as an audience on social media, it's very important that you have some sort of an organizational policy in place that gives everyone, both your audience and yourselves at an organizational level internally, some instructions and expectations about what will be happening as you're using social media as a tool to engage with this audience. So I definitely recommend that you take some time to develop a policy just so that if anything were to go wrong, you all have a clear roadmap in place. So now moving on to the next slide.
And cool, Brittany, before we move on to the next slide, could you just repeat the URL for that Buffer app again?
Absolutely. The URL for that is Buffer, B-U-F-F-E-R, app.com.
Great. And your website, too?
Absolutely. So my website is buildsocialconsulting.com.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you. So going on to the next slide, one other thing I wanted to make note of is the importance of mobile optimization. And mobile optimization basically means making sure that in whatever way you're reaching out to youth and young adults, you're making sure that it's optimized to display on a mobile device. So 3 out of 4 millennials owned a smartphone as of Q1 of 2013. So a high percentage of youth and young adults own smartphones. Contrary to what you may have thought, a lot of us are out there using a smartphone. And actually, if you pull up the next bullet, 1 in 4 teens are what they call cell-mostly internet users. So the only true digital divide that still exists is broadband access. So minority populations or youth and young adults that tend to be lower income, they will own a smartphone or some sort of mobile device where they're getting internet access. They are not getting broadband internet access on a laptop, but they are accessing the internet on their cell phones, which would make them a cell-mostly internet user. So 25% of teens are using the internet primarily on their cell phone, which means that it's incredibly important, if you pull up the next bullet, that you be mobile. And one way that you can do this is just look at your website. If you've got a smartphone, pull out your smartphone and pull out your organization's website on that smartphone and see how well it displays. If your website is very hard to navigate on a mobile device, you may want to look at some ways to mobile optimize that website. One of the quick and dirty tools out there that you can use to mobile optimize your website is a platform called Duda Mobile. That's D-U-D-A mobile.com. So I just wanted to make a note of that because youth and young adults are so often using their cell phones to access information. So moving on to the next slide, let's take a look at platforms. I kind of mentioned that there's a lot of platforms out there. It feels like The hit platforms are changing every day, and we all know, you have limited organizational capacity, so what platforms should you really be spending time and energy on? Contrary to what you may have heard in the news, Facebook is still the primary platform for millennials. Far and away, if we're able to get that first bullet up there, John, 91% of millennials are on Facebook, and it is their platform of choice. Now, what is true is that the attention of youth and young adults is more fragmented across multiple social sites than older age groups. However, again, 91% of millennials are on Facebook, and 76% of their time spent on social media is spent on Facebook. So that's why I've got the big Facebook thumbs up icon there, because if you want to reach youth and young adults and you have limited organizational capacity, Facebook is where you need to be. Now, the good news about that is that Facebook is sort of a melting pot. Facebook, for no matter what age range you're in, Facebook is the most popular platform out there. So again, if you're primarily trying to reach youth and young adults, Facebook is going to be the best place for you to be. And if you're trying to reach a mix of other folks, odds are they're on Facebook as well. So if you're trying to reach a mix of people, Facebook is a good place for you to be. So Facebook is, they're the king of the hill, and you can't go wrong by having a presence on Facebook. It is important to note, however, like I said, youth and young adults are spending time on multiple other platforms as well. So for example, 37% of 18 to 29-year-olds use Instagram, and 31% in the next bullet of 18 to 29-year-olds use Twitter. There are other platforms out there that are popular as well. There isn't as much data and information on use, but Snapchat and Tumblr are very popular platforms as well. Tumblr in particular, if you're trying to reach teens, is a very successful platform. And Snapchat, you all may not be aware of it, but there are a lot of opportunities for brands and organizations to use Snapchat to reach youth and young adults. However, in light of the fact that a lot of us are strapped financially and in terms of staff time, I wanted to just let you guys know that Facebook, if you have a limited budget and limited staff time, Facebook is really the place to spend your time and energy. One other important thing to be aware of is that according to a report from Shareaholic, Facebook referred 23% of all websites during Q2 of this year. So not only is Facebook where people are spending time, Facebook is a powerful tool to drive traffic to your website. So one other thing before we wrap up quickly here that I wanted to talk about, and John touched on this a little bit, is really the importance of creative content. I'm kind of recommending that you guys use Facebook, and Facebook is if you're a page, the news feed is very competitive to break into. So that is one downside to Facebook, is that you can make a post to your Facebook page, but there's no guarantee that your audience will see that post. Facebook uses a very complicated algorithm to determine how much of your audience sees whatever you post to your page. So it's very important that you have engaging and creative content that's useful for your audience so that it can break through that algorithm. So if we pull up that first bullet, it's important to note that user-generated content is the best content that's out there. It's 35% more memorable than other media, and in the next bullet, it's 50% more trusted than other media. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to practice in youth and young adult engagement and reach out to our audience and actually get content from them that we then disseminate on our social media platforms. So one thing that Pathways did last year to try and take advantage of this, and again, maximize positive benefit, we held a meme contest. So we asked our audience to submit memes that focused on how they manage their mental health in positive ways. And again, this was not unmoderated. We made sure that we were paying attention every step of the way and really moderating whatever was submitted to us. So we had a contest that we paired with an ad, a very inexpensive ad, to kind of break through and reach our audience more effectively and really specifically reach youth and young adults. And we got some wonderful submissions and awarded our first prize, which is the meme that you see here. So to wrap things up so that we have time for questions, if you want to jump in, John.
Yeah, I was just going to say we're about 5 minutes before we have to end, and I apologize if we won't be able to get to everyone's questions. This slide does give a little bit of a conclusion to what we've been talking about and just reiterates the main points, but I'd really like to focus on some of the questions that have come in. So let's see what we've got here so far, apart from all the technological glitches, which I really apologize for. Let's see. Yes, these slides will be available online. As you can see, we have the URL there for our webinar, so you'll be able to access this recording and get all of this information again. We discussed platforms. We discussed which ones were most effective for the age groups that we talked about. Let's see. Does the data include foster youth? That's a really good question. Brittany, did you find in any of your research anything that was in particular related to foster youth?
No, unfortunately that is not a population that anyone has done a study on specifically. So all of the research that I pulled is national level data. So there could be youth in care that are a part of that sample, but odds are they're not. And we know that a lot of the populations that we are talking about reaching have some specific needs and some specific obstacles. So it is really important that you think carefully about your target audience and have some conversations with those folks, even one-on-one, to identify, do they have a smartphone, right? How important is it that content be mobile optimized for them? Are they able to get on social media, wherever they happen to be living?
Right, and I would say that some of the research that I was looking at is pretty preliminary. I think a lot of this online stuff it's an emerging field, and I'm hoping that there will be research focused on specific populations in the future. But for the most part, I think we can extrapolate at least some of what we've found here to populations of foster youth within those age groups. Of course, we don't have that kind of refinement here. With the information that we have. I am getting a bunch of questions about some of those websites again that you had mentioned. Can you, Brittany, just repeat some of the most important ones? For instance, the mobile optimization site, Duda?
Yes, absolutely. And I don't have access to the chat feature that sends a chat to everyone, but if you have that, John, you can type
Sure, I'll type them in as you read them off.
Perfect. So the platform that helps you easily mobile optimize your website so you don't have to know code is called Duda Mobile. So that's D-U-D-A mobile.com.
All right. Sent that one.
Awesome. The other one that I mentioned was Buffer App, which is bufferapp.com. That's my favorite resource for social media management, where you can really schedule out all of your social media posts in one sitting and track analytics.
Great. We'll send that to everyone too.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then I guess the last one I just wanted to kind of get was your website too, Brittany?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's buildsocialconsulting.com. So that's BUILDSOCIAL consulting.com.
All right, and I'm going to send that to everybody as well, because I know that a lot of folks have questions very specific to you, and maybe they might contact you through your website
Yes,
for more
please
information.
do.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we are kind of up against another webinar that's going to be running out of our shop here. So I'm going to have to bid everyone a good morning and a good afternoon. And I wanted to send a special thank you to Brittany and for all of you for attending.
Awesome.
This
Thank you,
webinar will
John.
be available, and we appreciate your attendance.